Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar program, Managing Supply Chain Volatility, Can Your ERP Keep Up? Brought to you by Zycus and Aripart. So, as you know, Zycus is a leading software provider for source-to-pay automation solution. A few housekeeping items before we get started today. If you have any technical issues or questions, please use the chat box or the Q&A panel on the right side of the screen and we will respond right away. Also, if you have any issue with the audio, just click on the phone icon which you see above the chat window to receive the teleconference information. If you are disconnected, you will have to log in again using the same link and instructions provided in the original confirmation mail. If you continue to experience difficulties, please write to us at webcast@zycus.com. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. Please type your question in the chat box or the Q&A panel and submit them. At the end of the presentation, Bill Michels will be answering all your questions. If we are not able to answer any of the questions due to time constraints, we will be sending the answers post-mail after the webinar. We would also provide you with a webinar slide deck and the recording of the webinar within a day post the webinar. So I would like to introduce Bill Michels from Aripart Consulting. Bill Michels is the CEO from Aripart Consulting. Bill helps companies transform business strategies into maximum profits. He is a leading expert in purchasing and supply chain management. He is currently the CEO for Aripart Consulting and he has the experience of more than 25 years at ADR North America. In consulting, Bill has worked with some of the world's greatest companies across a wide spectrum of industries and countries, transforming procurement and the supply chain. Well known in the purchasing and operations management community and food and pharmaceutical industries, Bill is a sought-after speaker and writer with many publications, including co-authorship of the book Transform Your Supply Chain. He is now working on the new book focused on the area of supplier relationship management and published numerous articles. Bill has a BS in Business Administration from the Rochester University and an MBA from Baldwin Wallace University. He has a CPSM, CPM and FCIPS certification. He is also on the board of the Joey Nicaragua Foundation. Before we proceed with today's presentation, I would like to give all our attendees a brief overview of Zycus. We are an integrated software solution provider and specialize in the source-to-pay solutions. We offer full suite across the spectrum of sourcing and procurement, and as you see, we have more than 7 products comprising of spend analysis, contract management, FSM, e-sourcing, supply management, and also from the procure-to-pay suite, we have e-procurement and e-invoicing, which looks after the tactical part of your procurement. So with that, I would like to hand over to Bill.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning or hello, everybody, depending upon where you are. I've been speaking a lot and writing a lot about recent trends in purchasing and supply chain, and I'm really focused lately on the integrated supply chain, which really includes the integration of all links of the supply chain and its suppliers. Things like supply chain transparency, how the Internet of Things is going to impact our businesses, and link to demand planning, how we're going to automate the RFP and RFQ process. And it really got me wondering about, as we start to look at integrating the supply chain, what's going to happen, and how will our existing systems keep up and manage with all the changes that will be coming over the next few years. We've certainly seen a lot of change, and it's likely we're going to see even more as we move. All right, so what we're going to talk about is what are procurement's changing needs, and what do we see as we look forward into the next 3 to 5 years or so. How are our customers going to change, and what's that going to do, and what's the current state of IT? Right, so a couple of things that I'd like to highlight is we're actually in a global economy, and we're looking across multiple units. A lot of questions about whether we're going to be low-cost country source, we're going to chase low-cost country source, we're going to source close to manufacturing, or what our total overall strategy is going to be. And our really systems have to accommodate whatever that is. We definitely are experiencing shortened life cycles. You know, when I look at my phone and I buy a phone, I know that it's likely only good for 2, maybe 3 years before I'll need to replace it. Life cycles of our products have shortened. The cycle time is quicker. The demand for R&D is quicker. Demand for innovation is quicker. And the demands coming from our customers on the shortened product life cycle is really forcing us to look at business a different way. As I look at the demographics, 51% of the workforce is now, it's about 50-51 is now millennials, and we have 4 generations in the workforce. So, you know, our systems have to accommodate all of those generations and be able to drive information to everyone. You know, I did a talk yesterday to a group of plastics executives, and I was talking about, I think over time, you know, cost and price has been a real good focus for a long time, but I think, you know, it's going to move and shift to a value shift. And when we start to think about the speed of business, what becomes important to our organizations are being first in the market, having speed to market, having flexibility, understanding how to capture innovation from the supply chain, and really get more value out of the money we spend. So I think the speed of business is important as we start to think about how we're going to use our systems. And leading edge companies right now are thinking about, how do I integrate the supply chain? How do I take the business systems across the supply chain? Long term, I think we're going to see that level of integration in the supply chain. And one of the things I've written about before is that as the CPO identifies what the strategy should be, and as category managers look at what the supplier selection process is going to be, we're really just not selecting a supplier, but we're really starting to architect a supply chain. And we're going to have to architect the chain that's going to be the most effective, that gives us competitive advantage. So I think supply chain integration will be a big part of the procurement and supply chain job as we move forward. And then doing something with the available data. You know, I was talking a lot about managing that data, figuring out what that data is, and, you know, things like artificial intelligence is going to help us in terms of being able to search the web, find the sources, do the RFIs, and bring us lots of data that we won't be able to do by ourselves. So what that leads me to is, what are going to be the change factors that we have to consider? And of course, you know, the first one, and I've already mentioned it, is the integration. How do we architect the supply chain, integrate the information, use the Internet of Things to help us identify a real-time demand? So that's, I think, going to be something that we have to think about into the future. And I think, you know, I've already talked a little bit about, you know, E&Y did a study on megatrends in 2015, and one of the things that were something that I remembered and continue to look at is that one of the megatrends is technology will replace the work that humans are doing. And as we start to think of the ability to look at all that data, the ability to kind of instantly flag things across the supply chain, if it's integrated in business systems, it's going to be a technology-driven supply chain. And then the procurement role is going to change too as we start to think about it. It's going to be much more strategic, and supplier relationship management will play a bigger and larger role in everything we do. So I think you have to start thinking about how do we manage our suppliers, how are we going to drive the performance, how are we going to create the right metrics, how are we going to drive everything across that supply chain so that we get competitive advantage by the chain we architect. So having done that, there are going to be future drivers that we have to look at. One of the things that we have seen and will continue to see is a massive supplier consolidation. In fact, in the industries that I worked in prior to consulting, there in one area of packaging there were 10 suppliers, and today there's 1.5. In another area there were 8 suppliers, and now there's 2. So we're seeing that consolidation. We're seeing it in almost every industry, pharmaceutical especially, food again, and almost every industry. So we're seeing supplier consolidation. We're also starting to see our supply chains compete. So the best example I have of that is the automotive supply chain. When I look at automotive now, it's really kind of breaking up a little bit. There's a Japanese supply chain, there's a Korean supply chain, European supply chain, and the U.S. domestic supply chain. And while there's some mixing, they're starting to actually differentiate and compete. And I think that that's going to be a thing that we need to look at in the future, because we want the most competitive supply chain. We're going to see the development of artificial technology and intelligence that is going to be able to take that data and help us find suppliers that we wouldn't have been able to find on our own, and be able to do the criteria to help us sort it out. And that intelligence is under development right now in certain areas in certain universities. So I think that's the thing that's going to get us. And then, you know, the Internet of Things. I find that kind of amazing, because I have a car, and whenever I drive it, I don't drive it very much, but it sends me a full report after I drive it about tire pressure, the oil, everything else. So, you know, we're going to see and my refrigerator reports when it needs filters, and through an email. You know, those connections are going to make our demand planning perfect. We're going to be able to see real-time demand. It's going to be transferred down the supply chain, and we're going to be able to react in real time. So I think that the future for us is technology-driven, and we have to have the technology that will be able to help us understand how to cope with these things. And it's a big job yet for many IT departments. So, you know, there's a lot of changing dynamics. When I think about the kinds of changes that I see in my daily life, one of the bigger ones in the last at least 5 years is mobile computing. Many of our systems are offering mobile computing, and many people are working right off of the line on their iPads or their telephones or whatever tablet they have. They're really mobile computing is a changing dynamic, and a lot of our current systems haven't adapted to mobile computing, and we're starting to. I think the pace of change is increasing as well. So we're seeing more and more increases in the pace of change, and again, that goes along with the shortened product life cycles and the demand from customers. We are going to link to our suppliers, and our customers are going to link to us. And I think that those are things that, you know, when we think about our systems design, we have to think about in a different way. And that leads to what is our customers going to expect from us? And when I look at it, one of the things that is really critical is value delivery. Faster cycle times, continuous improvement, speed to market, innovation, integration, alignment with their business objectives, and sooner or later that alignment will come across the market. So those are some of the things you think about. So you think about all of those things. Flexibility and agility is something that our customers are going to expect. The other thing that people are starting to really expect is supply chain transparency. So when we talk about value delivery and we talk about architecting a new supply chain, we're really actually talking about how can we assign a value to what each supplier in that supply chain does, and they should be paid according to their value. That's a different concept than we have now. But you know, what that will do is that will actually make sure that we have a profitable, strong supply chain that can reinvest and deliver year on year, over and over again, with the kinds of stuff we need. And then we definitely need systems integration and performance. So those are some of the things our customers are starting to expect, and the demands are going to increase and not decrease. So as I think about this, I look at all the clients that I've had over the years, and I look at what is the state of IT. Well, you know, in firms that are growing or private equity firms, they may have individual disaggregated systems, business units, or have limited IT strategies, and these growth firms haven't really put them together. When I look at the global players, a lot of them have these very rigid ERP systems that are really driving the procurement and supply chain process. In smaller firms, a lot of old technology with many modifications that are impossible to upgrade. And then in medium-sized firms, there's ERP systems that are really dedicated to supporting the finance function. So when the thinking on ERP was first established, a lot of it was finance first and manufacturing second, and then we'll build our business systems around those functions. And usually those were the first ones that got implemented. On some of the smaller players, I've seen systems where it's really database driven, and it's supported by a lot of other processes. But in one of the firms, success in the firm was the ability to write queries. If you were good at writing queries and getting data, you were a leader in the company. So I think you have to look at that and say, will that sustain us in the future? So I started thinking about, well, what are the advantages and disadvantages of ERPs? Well, ERPs are great because you got shared information. It gives you financial visibility across the business. It really provides a lot of internal business integration. They're global, secure, and they definitely increase internal collaboration. But when you start thinking about the disadvantages, they tend to be rigid in nature. They tend to be costly to change and modify, and difficult to change and modify. And if you do change and modify them, it's very difficult to actually take and upgrade them into the future. So when you do that, you notice that they're rigid. They're very rigid and costly to change. Modifications, as I said, always result in difficult to change. The more band-aids you put on an ERP system, the harder and harder it is to make changes or upgrade. In fact, I've lived in corporate life where many of the processes were all workarounds. And when you do workarounds, you have to change all the workarounds to make it work with a new upgrade, and so the upgrades don't get done, and then 5 or 10 years later, you've got a system that's ineffective with a bunch of band-aids on it. So that's one of the disadvantages that I've seen in not only my corporate life, but in my consulting life. And once you capture business requirements, it's difficult to change to new requirements as the business changes. And there is a high cost to modify or change the system. So I guess the summary on this is, ERPs are really, really great, and they're everything we need. However, they're not very flexible and they don't change very quickly. So when I think about that, I think about what's the poor IT leader facing? Well, they're facing that the business is changing at a rapid pace, and there's need for flexibility in the current systems. Definitely flexibility and agility will lead to competitive advantage and win the race. So when a lot of the systems were set up, they were set up with rigid requirements to drive the business requirements when they were established. Now that the business requirements are changed, it's difficult and costly to make the changes in the system. And many companies have established workaround modifications, as I've said before. And when you start to do that, you start to really impact your ability to move forward as technology changes and as the business conditions change. So there's a lot of things that you get saddled with in some of the current systems. There's definitely now a requirement for mobile solutions, and in some systems that's not easy to accommodate. mobile computing does help us with speed and velocity and the information. And the other thing that's really tough on the IT leader is that when previous investments in systems are really high. I mean, some companies spend millions and millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, and in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars to build an ERP system. And once you get that done, to go back and look for capital to increase, change, or modify, and it costs a lot more money. Management's looking at that investment, and they may not be willing to relive the pain of another installation or a changing of the current installation. So really tough on IT leaders. It's a tough job. So I mean, I guess there's a couple things to consider when we're thinking about our ERP systems. One is, what's the cost, resource, and organization difficult to make that change? Or the third is, or the second is that a lot of new cloud-based systems and niche software companies have come in, and they enable the flexibility and agility, and they interface into an ERP effectively. So I guess the key is, do we work on the current system and spend money and build it and make it more flexible and continue to do that over the life of the business, or do we find third-party alternatives that might integrate faster, easier, with less cost? So those are some of the things that I think about when I'm looking at working with our clients. And the cloud technology, there are a lot of advantages when you look at that. There's a cost savings on the capital because it's already done. The upgrades are there, and you don't have hardware, so you always have upgraded software. And some of us who have now moved to like Microsoft on the cloud understand that you're getting the upgrades regularly, and you're getting the service too. So the other thing you get is global collaboration. You can work anywhere, anytime. There is disaster recovery. Fixed cost of operation is predictable, and in fact, some cases, the cloud technology software suppliers provide services as well. The IT management can be simplified, and you can adapt quickly to increasing computer resources for competitive advantage. Decision making is enhanced, and the green choice, less energy, less equipment, and you can easily integrate with an ERP. So it makes a lot of sense to think about how can you take and find the best add-ons to your system that are easy to integrate, that provide your company competitive advantage. But there are disadvantages too, and these are things that, if I had to think about the one thing that keeps our IT leaders up at night, it has to be the first bullet point here: security. Really have to have security, really have to understand how you're going to implement that security. You really have to really bulletproof your system, and that's something that leaders are wrestling with. The other thing is, you have to have a reliable internet. If your internet's not reliable, or you've got locations that are not good, then this is not a really great solution unless you can fix the internet problem. You can lock into a supplier and have your data reside on their system, and the ease of change may not be as easy, and you get a little less control. So those are the things that would keep our IT leaders sort of up at night and worrying about how do we integrate to this new process and this new system. I pulled this from a Gartner report, and it says postmodern ERP is the deconstruction of suite-concentric ERP into loosely coupled applications, some of which can be domain sites or smaller footprint applications that are integrated as needed, but prioritized by function need over architectural rigor, single vendor strategies, ease of IT management, and other IT-centric needs. So I think that kind of is what made me start to think about how are we going to change as we start to look at these megatrends, and as these megatrends start to impact us. So I think that's probably the point that I started this presentation at. moving on, what's the opportunities for procurement? Well, I think there's a big opportunity to firstly look at your business requirements again, benchmark and baseline. What are your current business requirements, and what's the gap between your existing capability and your current business needs for procurement? You need to work with IT to see if they have the resources to help you close the gap, develop a cost analysis detailing the benefits and ROI for improvement. In fact, I have to do this every time I go into a new client to see, where is the gap? What does the gap do? Both in systems, people, organizations, and process, but we're talking mostly about systems now. Once you identify that, what's the ROI for improvement? And the ROI for improvement could be value related, customer value related, speed to market related. There are lots of opportunities. And then you have to look at your total procured payment process, your e-procurement process. Do you have the ability to launch auctions? Do you have the ability to go on e-procurement? Can you automate your RFP, RFI process? And do you have a formal supplier relationship process? Because once putting in the supplier and identifying the contract and putting in the contract is the first step. But how do you manage that supplier for value? How do you make sure that once you put the contract in, if people that put the contract in and just leave it are really the thing drifts along and there's no value. The ones that do the best are the ones that actually take that supplier, work with that supplier, and drive that supplier performance and extract every bit of value they can are the people that are leading, and they're the people that are the most successful in their organizations and in their industry. And then if there's a ready-made solution, it's a good opportunity to capture it, close the gaps, and really minimize the cost. I'm really not a big technology guru, so I did ask Zycus, since they're sponsoring this workshop, to give me some examples of how a system integrates. And quite frankly, they gave me these three examples. Right, so this is how procurative pay in Zycus can link with the ERP. And so the master data file is shared, and then purchase orders can be entered into the ERP. Receipts and invoices can be put in. The request can go out into Zycus, and so there's lots of integration points. And so that's just one. I think if you look at this one, again, it's a one-to-one sort of relationship. The ERP generates the PO, and then the third one is the requisition to PO in Zycus and how that interfaces with the ERP. So I guess to summarize this all up, what I would say is, we're continuing to see changes in the world. It's likely that, as we move into the future, current ERPs will have some shortfalls in capability, data management, and they may not be able to meet our future needs. We can look at third-party software cloud-based add-ons that will provide additional opportunities to meet the current and future needs with a low predictable cost. And while the resources for IT support may be minimized, there will still be objections to overcome. I can see that, it's a lot of work. You got to do the integration, and then there's all those disadvantages that I identified. So as a procurement leader, you've got to identify the shortfalls and work with IT to overcome the objections. And then the other thing is that, as long as you're going to be in procurement or supply chain, change is inevitable. It's changed every decade. It's changed significantly, and I think the pace of change is happening now. In the last decade, there's been more change in procurement than there's been in the first 100 years of procurement. So change is inevitable, and we'll need to work very closely with the IT department to adapt to an ever-changing profession and an ever-changing need for data and integration. So with that, I think I'll turn it over to Lavesh.
Thank you, Bill, for the amazing presentation. Now we'll open the floor for question and answers. So anyone, if they have any questions to be answered, you may type in your questions in the Q&A box or in the chat box, and Bill will be happy to answer all your questions.
Do you want to talk about Horizon and let everybody know what's going on October 23rd and 5th?
So before we start with the question and answers, so I would like to introduce Horizon 2016. So Horizon is a flagship event and conference of Zycus. We have been doing this event for the last 5 years, and this is the 5th year in which we are doing Horizon. So this year's Horizon is at the Ritz-Carlton, Dow Mountain, Arizona. It's a 3-day event starting from 23rd of October to 25th of October. Over the course of 3 days, attendees will be, listening to a lot of keynote speaking sessions. We have Captain Mark Kelly of the Endeavour spaceship, who will be a keynote speaker for the complete conference. Also, we have a lot of breakup conference. Bill Michels will be there, and he will also be having a session over there, half an hour session. We have analysts coming in from SIG, Gartner, Hackett, and other leading analyst firms. So we don't want you guys to miss out on this opportunity to network and hang out with other, CPOs, VPs, and other procurement professionals from various parts of USA and also various parts of the world. You can use our special code WBR100 created just for you guys at horizon.com, and you will be getting a $100 discount on the existing pass of $899, which includes a 2-night, 3-day stay at the Ritz-Carlton.
Great. Do you see any questions?
As of now, we have no questions. Let's wait for a couple of minutes.
Okay.
So, Bill, we have one question over here. In your opinion, how do the forecasting models perform in the cloud solution?
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that. I had a client once that actually was an arts and crafts client, and they had 28,000 SKUs, and they were missing the fill rate to Walmart, which was incredible. But they had a lot of problems in terms of forecasting. Walmart was sending them the point of sale data out of every store every day. We took a third-party forecasting process. And we put it in, took the Walmart data, threw it through the forecasting system, and within 8 weeks to 10 weeks, they had gotten themselves up to a 99% fill rate on time, and then they were able to actually do the same thing with Michels, and it increased their turns from 3 to 5. And became one of the best customers. They could predict now when the retailers had a problem. So there's a lot of those forecasting processes out there. Some are better than others, and to be honest with you, a lot of people are actually, some of the big retailers are dropping ERP-based forecasting systems to put the third-party forecasting systems in. There's a couple, that I know of. One is Smart and the other is Galt. Those are, depending upon your operation, either of those would be good to look at. And they do some amazing things. One has a simulation model for independent demand. It depends on your company and what you need, but I will tell you they are excellent packages, and I've seen more than one company put in forecasting packages that greatly enhance their ability. So I think it's pretty good, and I think it will be eye-opening to look at the capabilities of some of those systems. I know that at least one of them has at least 14 algorithms, and they apply every algorithm by SKU, and they pick the best, whether it's winners or whether it's smooth moving average. They pick the best one for the SKU. And so it really enhances your capabilities. So take a look at them and see what happens.
Thank you, Bill, for the answer. We have one more question. So when you talk about volatility in supply chain, how do you think the relationship with suppliers over the years have changed or evolved?
I think that in some cases that we've had a problem with, looking at leveraging our suppliers and really driving every bit of cost out. I think what's happening now is that now that we have transparency, and any good procurement person should be able to identify material, labor, overhead, and profit, and they should look at, does the supplier have a sustainable profit? Is that something that will enable that supplier to reinvest and give you innovation? And then I think that the changes that I've seen are that you have to go out and work with those strategic suppliers where we have very few suppliers in the industry, and we're seeing the consolidation drive fewer suppliers in the industry. We need to have a really great relationship with that supplier. We need to have some transparency with that supplier, and we need to agree on what the common goals are. And we need to align our suppliers' objectives with our objectives, and we need to drive those suppliers to higher levels of performance and helping us achieve competitive advantage. And for that, they get the value in terms of sustainability and the right amount of profit for their business. And that's an open, more strategic conversation than we've had in the past.
So I don't think we have any more questions. We will wait for a couple of minutes for the questions to come in, or else after that we will, end the presentation with a vote of thanks.
Okay. Well, looks like we don't have any more questions, Ash, so...
So we have one small question over here.
Okay.
What were the names of the cloud forecasting solutions you mentioned in the presentation?
The first one was SMART, so SMART forecasting, and the second was John Galt. Both of those are good. I've used both, and those are two really good solutions. There's others too, I'm sure. So those are the two that I'm familiar with that have been successful in a lot of companies. And if you can look at their client list, which I think you'll find on the websites, they'll be there.
Okay, thank you, Bill, for the answer. So we will end up today's presentation and this webinar. Thanks a lot to Bill Michels from Aripart for such a lovely and a wonderful presentation he gave us today. If you have any more further questions or anything, you can contact Bill Michels at bill.michels@aripart.com, or you can follow him on Twitter @sourcingguy, and here is his LinkedIn page link. And also, if you have any other questions regarding the Zycus solutions, you might reach out to us at mktg@zycus.com. Thank you all for attending this webinar. We will be sharing the copy of this presentation and also the archive recording of this webinar in a couple of days along with the CH credits. Over to you, Bill.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for listening, and hopefully we'll catch up at the Horizon Conference.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, everyone.